بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر، الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. O you who believe, keep your duty to Allah as it ought to be kept, and die not unless you are Muslims. Sadaqallahul Aliyyul Azim. This is the general translation of this verse of the Holy Quran. And literally, of course, it's true. But I would say that you can translate it as, O you who believe, follow Allah's guidance so that you die not, unless you have made your peace with Allah. The topic of today's sermon is treatment of anxiety. And of course, life consists of 3 phases. There is past, that's gone. There's not a lot you can do about. And then there is the future, that is yet to come. And you don't know what will happen. The only aspect of life where you can do something is the present, which is now. And people talk about, the golden age of Islam and 700 years ago and 500 years ago and so on. And I ask them, when you're driving, do you look ahead or do you keep looking in the rear view mirror? If you keep looking through the rear view mirror, you're going to end up with an accident. Because you're always looking towards the past. And there is nothing you can do to change it, whether it was good or bad or whatever it was. If you didn't study enough for an exam and you don't get a good grade or you fail, there's not a lot you can do. You can't go back and correct that error by putting in more study. And the important thing about the present is, and about keeping your duty to Allah is this, that if we do the right thing, then it means that we're at peace. It doesn't lead to anxiety. The kids are the obvious example, aren't they? They come home on Friday and they have homework, and you say to them, get it done and get it out of the way. Here it is, do it, finish. You have a duty to do. You have a duty to complete this homework before you go to school on Monday. Whether you do it on Friday, whether you do it on Saturday, whether you do it on Sunday, whether you do it in the car on the way to school, you have to do it. But the longer you leave doing your duty, the more stress and the more anxiety it leads. If you do that homework Friday night, or that kid does the homework on Friday night, he knows if something goes wrong, if there is a problem, he's got all of Saturday and he's got all of Sunday to fix it. But if he leaves it until he's in the car, being driven to school, desperately trying to do whatever it is, if there is a problem, then there is no chance to be able to fix it. And that leads to anxiety. And that leads to sadness, and so on. We always look at doing your duty to Allah in the sense of prayers and fasting and so on and so forth. But doing your duty to Allah also includes all your social interactions, how you deal with other human beings, and the example I gave with your teachers, etc. To go back to the example of the homework, if you don't do it or if you don't do it properly, and the teacher says, why is this wrong? Are you going to lie? What reason are you going to give? I was doing this homework as I approached the school in the car. Or are you going to lie? Whatever that lie may be. And if you're lying, are you keeping your duty to Allah? And that is the point. That in every aspect of your life, social aspect, business aspect, you need to do the right thing to be able to keep your duty to Allah. And if you don't, as I said, the kid who's trying to do his homework in the car is going to become increasingly anxious that he has to finish. And that applies to all aspects of our lives. We should be doing our duty every second, every minute, every hour. Another example, people open a shop, they hide rotten bananas and rotten tomatoes under the good ones. A customer comes, they pick 2 good tomatoes and 2 rotten ones and put them in a bag and give them to the man. You charge them the same price. In the meantime, there's a call to pray, and they rush to prayer. But the point is that person forsake doing his duty to God while he was transacting his business affairs. And we do the same thing with our social affairs. That man then comes back with those rotten tomatoes and he opens the bag and there are 10 other customers and he starts to scream and shout at you. You're going to become anxious. You're going to lose your other customers. And that'll run your business down. And you'll become anxious and depressed. And that is the thing. Why do the wrong thing in the first place? If you do the right thing, you don't have to worry about anything. It's only when you do wrong things that you become anxious and stressed and so on. Yes, difficulties come. Difficulties are a part of life. And God says, I'll try you with something of loss and hunger and so on. And he does. And that takes us to the second point. And that is that our anxiety, our sadness become worse when we think we are on our own. We are alone. There's no one to help. It's like children, even when they're grown up. They're going to school to pick the kids up, and the car breaks down. Now, if they have a mobile phone or a car phone and they can ring their parents who may live close by, they can say, my car's broken down. You need to pick X from school. Can you do it for me, please? The child knows he can depend on that parent to do that. Once he's contacted the parent, he is then calm. All he's got to worry about is getting his car fixed. But if he feels he's got no one to depend on, no one to help, how anxious is that parent going to be? If their child is stuck in school, they don't know how long it's going to be before the car is fixed. It's what makes anxiety and depression and so on worse is this feeling that you're alone. There is no one to help. And this is why God says it's important that you depend on me, that you remember me. That you remember me at good times and bad times. We all remember God and say, when some calamity occurs, we say, oh God, why me? But when something good happens, we never remember God. When we win the premium bond, we don't remember that we should share that good fortune with those who are less fortunate than us. You just think, how lucky am I? And God doesn't enter into our thinking until we run out of money. And God says, sometimes I try you with riches. There was a program happened a long time ago. There was something called football pools, and this family won £100,000. It was the first family to win more than £100,000 on football pools. And at the time when they won it, in today's terms, it would perhaps be £10 million. But 15 years later, they were penniless. They were only left with one shop and a flat in which they lived above that shop, and they were about to lose that. See, God tried them by giving them riches, but they failed the test, and they suffered the consequences. And this is one thing that we always forget. In Surah Nahl, God says that whoever is righteous, in other words, whoever does his duty, whether it's a male or a female, then Allah will cause him to live a good life and give them their reward in the hereafter as well, according to the best of what they used to do. This word taqwa is translated as fear of Allah, righteousness, and so on and so forth. But Hazrat Maulana Muhammad Ali, I think it's the best translation, is doing your duty. And that's why I translated it here as whoever does their duty, male or female. So God tells you to do the right thing. And if you do the right thing, then there's no anxiety, there's no fear, there's no sadness. And at the same time, if you always remember that God is on your side, as long as you've done your duty, God is on your side and He's going to help you. Sometimes you pray when you're in difficulty, and help comes from a source that was unimaginable and relieves your anxiety. God tells us to be moderate. God tells us to be modest. How many of our problems are caused by the fact that we want to show off? Next door has a car, we want 2 cars. Next door has something, we want the same thing but more expensive. This competition in material things, rather than what really matters, and that is competing with each other in doing good to humanity, in supporting other people. in not sympathizing, but empathizing with other people. How would I feel if I was in that situation? Trying to take on some of their burden. If we do that, if we do these things, then anxiety will disappear. But we ignore all of these things. We ignore the difficulties other people are having. The current example is that there are poor people, there are disabled people, there are people who depend on machines just to be able to breathe and live. The price of electricity has gone through the roof. And the electric companies are either simply just cutting off their electricity or putting them on prepaid meters, etc. It is this kind of hard-hearted, unfeeling approach to life and society that is forbidden by Islam. That is what causes anxiety amongst his creatures. Do you think, there's a man who's on a respirator that has to be on 24 hours a day, and he can't afford to pay his electric bill, and you switch off his respirator? Do you think that God is not going to hold you to account for that? Sometimes it seems to me that, people who run these businesses appear to think that they're beyond and above the divine law. Because anxiety and depression is not just restricted to the needy and the poor and the impoverished. Some people think it's only the poor who have anxiety and depression and so on. It's not true. Rich people also have anxiety and depression. Why? Because in material terms, they have more to lose than the poor people. They've got used to an easier life. They've forgotten the hardships. And even when they see someone suffering from what they went through, it still doesn't remind them. It still doesn't make them empathize with that person. And God says in Surah Al-An'am, verse 125, that in fact, I'll go to another point rather than that verse I was going to recite. This is a point has come to my mind. What is heaven? What is paradise? The basic cardinal rule, essential of paradise is peace and contentment and happiness. And people have their own interpretations of what heavens is and this and that and so on. But I would suggest that heaven, which in my view starts in this life, is a life that's full of happiness and contentment. You don't need a huge amount of material possession for that. And this is what will be carried over into your next life. So I would suggest that if you want to avoid anxiety, if you want to avoid depression, the first thing is to remember to do the right thing, whatever the circumstance. And the second thing is, however hard life may be, remember that in Allah you have a friend. And if you turn to Him, He will help you. Do not become depressed. Do not give up. Keep on doing the right thing. And inshallah, the clouds will lift. And you will find that things will get much better. But when they do, remember your neighbor or your friend or your colleague for whom things are still hard. And just like God extended His hand to help you, extend your hand to help Him. Barakallahu lana wa lakum fil Qur'anil Azim wa nafa'ana wa iyyakum bil ayati wa zikril hakim. Innahu ta'ala jawadun karimun malikun birrahmanir rahim. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah nahnuhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruhu wa nu'minu bihi wa natawakkalu alayhi wa na'udzu billahi min shururi anfusina wa min sayyiati a'malina. Man yahdihillahu fala mudilla lahu wa man yudlilhu fala hadiya lahu. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم انصر من نصر دين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم واجعلنا منهم. اللهم اخذل من خذل دين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم ولا تجعلنا منهم. عباد الله رحمكم الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. اذكروا الله يذكركم وادعوه يستجب لكم ولذكر الله أكبر والله يعلم ما تصنعون. الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله. الله أكبر. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen Ar-Rahmanir Rahim Maliki Yawmiddin Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين إنا أعطيناك الكوثر فصل لربك وانهر إن شانئك هو الأبتر الله أكبر سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين إذا جاء نصر الله والفتح ورأيت الناس يدخلون في دين الله أفواجا فسبح بحمد ربك واستغفره إنه كان توابا الله أكبر سمع الله لمن حمده ربنا الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر السلام عليكم ورحمة الله السلام عليكم ورحمة الله أستغفر الله this is all for today. Our next broadcast, inshallah, will be on Monday when we return to our Tadabbarul Quran and reflections on the Holy Quran series, which unfortunately came to a halt because of various factors beyond our control. Until then, I pray that Allah keeps all of you safe and sound and free from harm. Assalamu alaikum, Khuda Hafiz, and goodbye.